Welcome to the entirely official power rankings for the newly established league, Pokemon Draft League, run by our friend Chartwig. Chartwig's League, I guess would be the name of it. Doesn't really seem to have a name. We'll go with that. Uh, yeah. So power rankings are generally when people, look at the teams from a draft, rank them, put them in an order, right? Give their opinions and strengths, weaknesses, what's best, what's what. Um, and yeah, this is one thing that's interesting in this league is that we did a free draft, so there's not really as many tiers. So these are really being judged by a free draft criteria. All these teams are pretty solid by the standards of a normal draft, right? Because in a normal draft, you have a lot more lower tier Pokemon mixed in. With this, you do not. So that's just one thing to know about the criteria. These would obviously all be very strong teams for a regular draft, just because the sheer kind of power in them. But also means I'll be a little harsher in terms of the rating and weaknesses. And I'll get more into how I think free draft changes what makes a draft good or bad as we go. But yeah, let's get right into it. I'm going to make this a little quicker than usual, so I won't ramble on too much. For the casual league, which we have up right now, we see in seventh we have Brian's team. Brian did Rain, and I think Rain's always pretty good. And you've got some good rain pieces. Kingdra's a classic rain piece. Gudra, classic rain piece. Obviously, Pelipper, good center. But from there, things are a little more unorthodox, and that's fine. Honestly, you don't want to do just flat out rain. I think in draft it's a little too predictable, and you want to give yourself some variation. But I don't think the full set of rain support is here, and in general, the team's kind of what would you call it, like mishmash in terms of what types and Pokemon are there. Not that it's bad or anything, but it's like there's a lot of types that aren't here, and the types that are doubled up don't necessarily make sense. I'm not that you can't have things like two electric types, but like these two electric types aren't really contributing anything that the other doesn't. So it's like you don't need Electros and Ampharos necessarily. Still a solid team overall, but like I think it's going to be. I put it weakest because there's just quite a few things missing or in um, what you call it, light amounts, where it's like you've got Stealth Rocks, but you've only got one Stealth Rock setter and it's Druddigon. So it's like unless you want to bring Druddigon every week, you're not going to have Stealth Rocks. Just some rough things like that. But it's a solid team, honestly, with things like Dragonite and Darmanitan too. I think this team's going to be a lot more offensive oriented, which is honestly fine in a free draft like this where defense is a lot less viable. Next up, sixth, we have Jose. I'm working up. I feel like that makes sense, right? You build to the conclusion. We have Jose, who did the opposite, went with a Sun team. Now, this I like a little more just because it seems a little more cohesive in terms of what Pokemon were picked. Obviously, it's a little my general instinct would be put Sun below Rain because Sun's a little worse than Rain, right? It's kind of harder to set it up to when there's like Torkoal, who's not really as good as versatile as Pelipper overall. But I think the weaknesses of Sun are really covered here well. Things like Venusaur is a great Sun sweeper who can cover water, fire's weaknesses. You've got Slowking, who's a great defensive water that really benefits Sun. It can use like Teleport to pivot things in, and even use Sunny Day itself. Rhyperior really benefits from Sun. You've also got a weird hail thing going on because Slowking can use Chilly Reception to bring in one of two Slush Rush sweepers, being Sand Slash, Alola, or Arctazalt. So that's really interesting, I think. Certainly adds some um, other options aside from just Sun stuff. Crawdon is a really good wall breaker. You're not going to be able to wall this team, generally speaking, because of things like Crawdon and Sunsweeper and Arcanine. My gosh, most teams cannot take a rock attack, and having to take a stab rockhead head smash, forget about it. I guess in terms of criticisms, the team is a little slow. I guess that was one something I breezed over with Brian too. Both teams don't really have any Pokemon at or above 100 speed. I don't think Arcanine gets close with 95. But looking at it now, yeah, so these teams are really reliant on weather to get speed going at all, which is a bit of a hindrance, especially when you're using something like Torkoal who needs boots to even not die to rocks, so that hurts his longevity without leftovers. And yeah, it's a lot of positioning work. This team's really hyper offensive though, and at least you've got some other modes like webs along with weather that can try to make that lack of speed work. But it's definitely one of the bigger weaknesses of this team. Um, Next up we have Michael. I put him in fifth place. I like Michael's team. I hate to sound like a broken record. Let's get to the good parts here first, so that doesn't sound like I'm just repeating myself. Really good team. Mega Mawile, really strong. Toxtricity, Metagross, more niche picks those two, but they're still really solid Pokemon. That can do a lot of damage. May make you a really nice setup sweeper that can really stop yourself from getting killed. Good defense, decent defensive backbone at least with things like Gastrodon, Empoleon, Caboleon. A lot of ions here. Primarina's really good defensively, and Incineroar can work defensively. So really, this team is, I'd say, it's good overall at taking hits and dealing them out as well. Longevity maybe a little lacking, right? Because your only things with actual recovery are Gastrodon, and that's it. So you're going to have to run a lot of rest if you actually want to do the defensive game. Thankfully, the offensive game is just as fruitful. But what really the weaknesses come in and say, once again, slow team, right? You've got, I don't think Typhlosion Izui hits 100 like the Johto one does, so that's under 100. So Cobalion is your only Pokemon at or above 100 speed. So this team's just going to be really slow, right? Your fast Pokemon are really going to be able to prey on this team. A slower Scarfer can prey on this team. That's a real big issue. Another one too, I hate to put this so low, but because like this team actually is pretty good overall, but I think another reason it had to be lower was because Earthquake and ground types can really do well here. Um, with Moltres being your only ground immunity or ground resistance, and there's a lot of ground weaknesses here. Ground moves will go in really nicely. And if you have a rock move too for Moltres, well, cool, that's perfect coverage. So that I think will be a big problem for this team, potentially. But overall solid. If you can deal with the speed, if you can deal with the ground moves, this team does pretty well. It has basically all the options it needs. Longevity a little lacking too in terms of good recovery moves, but that's not the biggest deal in free draft. All right, next up for fourth we have Colin. This is a weird janky team, but I honestly think it earns its spot above the other three. Because you see things like two poison types, two steel types right away. Like, what are we doing? Two ice types even. We see Kyurem and fucking Regice. We see five ghost types. I think this man's going ghost mono on us. But honestly, it's still a really decent team. I feel like just because the speed is there. And like with the past teams, you've got Crobat, Zoroark, Gengar, who can actually let you play a faster offensive game, which this team kind of has to play because even though it does cover its weaknesses somewhat well from some of the dueling types, the Ghost spam really isn't covered very well. Aside from Zoroark Kasui, who can thankfully make those Ghost moves do nothing, Dart moves are going to be really good against this team. But that's at least a little less damning, I think, because you have the speed stats, right? So you can actually play a game of attrition more effectively. Um, yeah, you have all the you want. Otherwise, really, like hazards are there. Speed tier is good. It's the limiting's over the types, right? But these are pretty good types. Ghost, Steel, Dragon. Like a lot of the types you really want are here. Obviously, you don't have any fairies, right? But like this team's not doing anything that defensive, so I wouldn't discredit too hard for that. It's very interesting. I don't know. I feel like this team could get blown out of the water. Maybe putting it in the middle is a bit too high. But I think if it's played properly, something kind of weird like this could definitely work, even if it is very much leading into wearing somebody down on a front until they can't hold back with, like, say, their ghost checks. Because you've got to check for one ghost, but you have to check for five ghosts. I don't know. And Shedinja can do weird stuff too, even without Terra being legal. So yeah, I like this team. I don't know. I'll gamble on it. I'll say it earns the fourth spot. Next up we have Tony. I think Tony did a pretty good job with drafting. Tony's been around draft for a bit now, and I think he really knows what he's doing at this point. Um, yeah, I mean, Rillaboom's good. Grassy terrain's I guess the elephant in the room is Rillaboom and Tapu Bulu. Is that ever really necessary? No, not really. But this team makes it work, I think, at least by throwing on things like Halucha and Magnezone, Dragalge that really abuse grassy terrain as much as possible. So I do think Tony's gonna get the mileage out of it. I'm curious what kind of weeks he'd bring both of those, but I suppose we'll see. Rillaboom is generally kind of better due to Grassy Glide and the fairy type on Bulu not bringing a ton, but sometimes the fairy type on Bulu does bring something defensively with dragons, and you can even run Dazzling if you really want. But yeah, solid team overall. The offensive options are excellent, good speed tiers. So things like Blacephalon, Holucha to hit hard and fast. And then you've got some, I think even Rillaboom's Fang Glide. And then you've got a lot of slower stuff, right? Like Dragalge, Hatterene that can really dole out harder hits and also take some hits. Megalodon provides a nice wish support backbone. You could maybe still complement that with Magic Mounts from Hatterene. Dondozo's certainly bringing a really good defense that I think Dondozo's a really good pick for this league because there's going to be a lot of the strong, almost every team will have some strong fucking setup sweepers because it's free draft and you can get whatever ones you want at any time, basically. So Dondozo I think is a really good pick and does benefit a little bit from Grassy Terrain's healing, right? So that's another good, yeah, a lot of good synergies here. In terms of weaknesses, looking at it now, um, I suppose the hazard game could be a lot better. I think Tinkaton is your only stealth rock setter. If I'm not mistaken, Halucha might get it. No, I don't think Halucha gets it. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just Tinkaton, so that's really limiting. Similarly, I don't think hazard removal is very good at all. You've only got Hatterene can certainly bounce away the hazards, right? But if you can't do that, Halucha's forced to defog, which it basically never wants to do. So yeah, this team's in a really rough spot with Hazards. I think otherwise really good synergy, but the Hazards game isn't there on removal or setting. So I think that's would be one of the team's Achilles heel and for heels Achilles heel? I don't know, plural Achilles heel. That'd be the main weakness of this team, I would argue. But overall, very solid. Good job, Tony. Second up, we have our good friend Luca, who did something interesting, and I like it. I think this team has a good mix of bulk and offense. I see a lot of offensive Pokemon that are really menaces, like Komo-O, Iron Valiant. Slurming's pretty solid. And I see classic bulky Pokemon that are just known for being hard to tear through, like Cresselia, Skarmory, for fuck's sake, Vaporeon, Weezing, really solid stuff, really hard to break through. Um, and then, but again, like we said, the powers there. Mega Absol's more of a niche mega pick. But I think it's decent. It works pretty well. It's one of the better knockoff spammers. Magic Bounce means you can Swords Dance in front of a lot of defensive Pokemon that can't outright kill you. And it's yeah, the speed tiers are certainly there in spades because you've got Iron Valiant, you've got Mega Absol. There's certainly fast things. Sandy Shock's got 101. The speed tiers are nicely placed too. I was thinking there might be a big gap between Komo-O and like Iron Valiant, but then I saw Sandy Shock's like nope, works pretty well. Um, in terms of weaknesses, I don't see anything that would be too problematic for this team. I suppose if I had to make something up on the spot looking at it, um, no, I'm having trouble. I guess fire's kind of a concern, but I mean, not really. You've got Vaporeon, and you can stir your ledge with Flash Fire, who can take care of that. And that has the Hazard game. Hazard game Skarmory is kind of a one-man show controlling that. You've got a Magic Bounce. I suppose, yeah, Weezing is defog, honestly. Yeah, you're decent with Hazards. It's not great, but you're solid. Sandy Shacks can throw them down. Yeah. Yeah, no, in terms of weakness, I'm having trouble. I don't want to dwell on this same team too long, so I'm not going to just try to think of any, but really good stuff. Um, oh, here we go. I made something up. I made some bullshit. Good news, Luca. Uh, I suppose Circuledge, Weezing, and this is a real nitpick. Circuledge, Weezing, and Skarmory. None of them are particularly specially defensive, so I guess maybe a special attacker Fairy could lay into this team pretty well, right? Especially when there's things like Iron Valiant, Slitherwing, Komo-O. I suppose that is 5-3 fighting types, right? So maybe a Fairy, maybe a certain really offensive Fairy could pose a challenge to this team. Something like a Mega Diancie or a even a Hatterene maybe with the right set would be pretty hard to beat. But that's a pretty minor complaint. This team is really good overall, despite being kind of unorthodox in the terms of the choices. Right, it's a lot of new Pokemon, so I'm really excited to see how it does. Next up, we have first in place is Tom. Now, the reason I put Tom over Luca is pretty minor. I thought both these teams are very good. I think I ultimately just went with Tom because it's a bit of a what would you say? Some of the Pokemon using are very time tested. So as much as I like Luca's team, and I think she has a solid chance at top spot, Tom is using more Pokemon I've seen more often. So I do feel a little more comfortable. Like, okay, well, Garchomp, Mega Scizor, Azumarill, those are like champion tier Pokemon right there. You tend to see those on a lot of winning draft teams. Um, but yeah, getting into the actual merits of Tom's team, everything you really want is here pretty well. You've got good range with speed tiers going up from Garchomp 102, Alakazam 120, up to Regieleki at whatever the fuck Reggie. Oh, it skipped Espeon too. So you get the idea. 110, and then with Espeon 120 with Alakazam, whatever the fuck Reggieleki's doing. So really good range of speed tiers. Really leans on hyper offense in a way that I think free draft is conducive for because you're not forced to draft lower tier things. You've got the webs with Shuckle. Cloyster can be an offensive hazard spinner with Rapid Spin itself, or be a great shell smasher. Starmie gives you another offensive Rapid Spin, Magic Bounce with Espeon. Matt Alakazam not even caring about hazards. Like the hazards control is on point here, which is really good. Scissor comes to Debug. And the offensive game is even better because you've just got these fast attackers that can just deal hits without caring, like Alakazam or Espeon, without really minding their own bulk. Or yeah, but you've also got some nice setup things like Azumarill and Garchomp that can do whatever they need that week. Certainly Mega Scissor with Swords Dance. Chandelure also really good offensive Pokemon that can either go slower Wall Breaker or faster with a Scarf to shut stuff down. I suppose in terms of weaknesses, the defenses aren't really there. Obviously, Garchomp, Scissor, Azumarill, they can do defensive roles, even Cloyster or Starmie, but because the backup's not there, you're never really going to be doing that with this team. And I suppose that's where maybe Luca has the advantage because Luca's team has a bit more defensive and offensive balance. but Tom's really overwhelming emphasis on offense, I think, especially in a casual league where maybe players aren't always prepared for what their opponent's Pokemon are going to pull out. I think that might really give him the advantage between those two teams, but we will see. Honestly, you could basically put them even in my ranking. I think they're both really good. Um, all right, with that done, I think it's time to shift to the veteran league. I'm sorry if I've been blitzing through it here, but I only have so much time to get this done, so I want to make sure I get to everybody. All right, I guess since I said I'd be going up, I'll start with me. I put myself on the bottom. I just put myself first or bottom because I don't want to actually talk about my own team. Yeah, I think my team's decent. I got a nose pass. Nose pass is really cool. There's some other Pokemon there. Who really cares? I kind of just took the most broken ones that were left because I thought it would be fun. All right. Now we readjust. We see Rash in the 8th spot. Rashi, I'm not sure. Rashay? Raish. I don't know. Somebody can fill me in on that later. But yeah, I think this team's when you see a lot of pink blobs, right? You generally know what you're in for, right? You see a certain amount of pink blobs on draft, and that it's a stall theme, which is fine. Might be personal bias here. It certainly is, but I feel like having had some bad experiences using stall a couple of years ago, I think when Gen 7 was new and it just tended to get BTFO'd every time in draft, I feel like stall is a lot harder to make work in draft because stall tends to prey on the meta and the fact that Pokemon only have so many coverage options and that you can abuse that by bringing a stall team that will limit their coverage options and switch in Pokemon that can't be hurt. But with draft, your opponent knows exactly what you have. They don't have to worry about a meta. They just have to worry about the Pokemon you have, and they can tailor each of their offensive sets to be able to hit everything. Which 11 Pokemon that's a lot to hit. But if you've got the right coverage or you can do a mixed attacker much more viably, it's not always impossible, especially when these Pokemon are more passive. So things like Sub are going to be a nightmare. Trick choice items are going to be really nightmare, and your opponent can abuse them. Um, but in terms of things this team does right, not to just rag on Stall, I think bringing two offensive Pokemon is very smart. I really would like to see more, honestly, and probably more diversity with them. But Haxorus and Salamence as set of sweepers mean that you can position your opponents to be weakened, obviously, I would think is the goal. And then Haxorus or Salamence can come out with a Dragon Dance and Sweep to take advantage of those Pokemon in their weakened state. Klefki, though, it can be a stall piece, it can be an offense piece, it can be a lot of things. Here, it's obviously more of a stall piece. But it also, you can do a Reflect Light Screen playstyle with those dragons to get them going, in addition to the usual Klefki Thunderwave Spike shenanigans. Mega Sableye, it's not an original statement, but it's a very good support option for these kinds of stall teams with Magic Bounce and Ghost Dark being a very good typing. And I do love Garganacl. Nothing really insightful to say. I just think it's a great Pokemon. I love that guy. But yeah, I honestly don't see how this team is going to avoid falling into a lot of the stall pitfalls I've experienced and seen from opponents and myself when they run draft stall. But I do think it's still a solid team, though. It's just a personal bias. Gonna have to put it lowest for that. But we will see. I think semi stall is very strong. I think this leans a little too hard into the stall for my taste, but we'll get up the rankings as we go. Um, 7th we have Declan. Declan likes to draft very unusual teams, and he's certainly done it again. The legacy Cramorant is of course there. Brambleghast to carry over from his last successful Nintendo Club season of Draft League. Um, he's drafted 2 water flying types. I mean, that's not particularly relevant to anything, but it just gives you a sense of he's doing something. There's a thought process here, and you can kind of see it because yes, there's 2 water electric types, well, 2 water flying types. That's a big electric radius, but your electric types are going to be hard pressed to really find any fertile ground here, right? Because you've got Clodsarg's really good against them, and then you've got Megalatias, very bulky dragon type resist. Same for Rotom Heat. Electrode, Hisuian Electrode with its grass electric. It's another 4 times electric resist, and Brambleghast, another grass type. It's one of those things where I know a lot of people who cringe at stacking types. They're like, oh no, I don't want to 2 the same type, but that's really not a problem often. I see Declan has 2 poison types. I see Declan has 2 grass types. I see he has 2 fire types and 2 obviously 2 water, 2 flying types, so on. The list goes on. But I don't think it's a problem because I think his team is really well balanced around dealing with it, and even the types he has used, they cover each other well. Offensively, this can be really annoying to deal with because Kingambit is just a well-known menace that I don't need to go into detail about. Glamora is famously good at stacking hazards. Gyarados, a great setup sweeper. Megalatias, an amazing setup sweeper that arguably shouldn't be. People were talking about Kingambit. I think Megalatias is a more questionable include in a draft league than Kingambit, especially without Terra, but I guess that remains to be seen. Because Megalatias has really a million good setup options, and it doesn't even need stab. Licky Licky provides you a little bit of a cleric defense thing, and Clodsire obviously can bulky Megalatias. I think I like this team on both offense and defense, and the speed tiers are there too. There's nothing wrong with this team, just obviously the way it's lopsided means it's going to be more about how Declan uses it than had the actual quality of the team itself. So that's why I put it at 7th, because there's a lot of pressure to come up with good sets and make sure everything works well. I hope that makes sense. At 6th, we have Ron. Ron has drafted a good team. Ron's team is really solid, and this would be a beastly team in like any other draft league. But the one thing with it is, it doesn't look like a free draft team to me, and that's to Ron's credit, actually, maybe for using Pokemon he likes as opposed to just whatever broken shit's left on the board. um, but like I didn't, there's not a Pokemon on here that makes me go like, oh fuck, I don't want to deal with that. Like maybe an Amorous for some teams, but like that's about like all these Pokemon and Mamoswine. I guess defensively is always impossible to switch into, but that's just how Mamoswine is. There's a lot of Pokemon like that in draft league. But there's no Pokemon that's like, oh fuck, that's really like an S tier like top threat. And that's not really a criticism of the team, so I won't dwell on it too much. But yeah, it's just something that you notice right away. But overall, the team's really solid. You've got great defenses. I think it's smart to have 2 water types, and one of yours is Toxapex, because Toxapex is very good, but it's also a little limited into more of a defensive stally type role. So Araquanid can also come hitting hard with water moves. Bronzong's a great mid tier steal. Not that tiers matter here, but it is. It's a really good one. Hydreigon synergizes well with so much. Not much needs to be said there. Both genies are nice to see. I think they both work here pretty well. Hippowdon's a good ground type that provides some solid bulk. I guess there's a bit of type doubling here too, but with 11 Pokemon, it's kind of hard to avoid, and I don't see any aspect of it being an issue. I think the types are stacked in a way that, sure, you've got 2 flying types and 2 water types, but there's Hippowdon and Mamoswine, so electric types aren't going to find purchase necessarily. It's like a solid. I mean, I can't like give a big criticism, but I guess again the big criticism is just like, where's the broken shit? This team looks balanced actually to an extent. I mean, in another draft it wouldn't be balanced, but for our league here, it looks pretty balanced. But we'll see how Ron does with it. Overall, I think this team's quite good. I guess the hazard removal is no hazard removal's fine because you've got the Genie's defog, Delmise can Rapid Spin. Nothing here loves to remove hazards. I guess that's another little nitpick, but overall quite good. 5th, we have Rob. Rob's team looks really good, and I can't believe it's this low, but yeah, I guess that's the nature of free draft. You've got Tabu Lele, who's insanely hard to deal with defensively. You've got Sneasler, who's a little overrated, I think, having used it quite a bit, but it's still a strong pick, and it can do a lot of cool stuff. Meowscarada, which is just fantastic. Just a lot. I don't need to go like read the whole list, but there's a lot of really good Pokemon here, especially on the defense side. Probably the only reason it's even so low is because more of the amazing things tend to be a little more defensive here, like with your core with Quaquaval, Skeledirge, Tangrowth, Excadrill, and I guess that's a little less what we're looking for in free draft. But I mean, the offense is here too, right? It's just yeah, it's a lot of good pieces. I just think some of the synergy could be better. Where it's like I see Excadrill and Mega Tyranitar, like that is the last Sand Setter I'm gonna want if I'm using Excadrill. Like get me a regular Tyranitar, get me a Gigalith even, just because I want to have that option to use Smooth Stone to really make sure Excadrill get the sand it needs. But this team can really overrun with things like Sneasler's Speed, Tapu Lele Scarf, Quaquaval's Aqua Step stuff. While also being able to take hits very well. I didn't even mention Manaphy, but that's always a good out of nowhere, out of left field setup as attacker. But yes, some of the synergy choices are a little questionable. I feel the speed tiers kind of are a little whack. I think because you go from what is it? I guess Tapu Lele to Meowscarada is not that bad. You're a little missing in the 100 range. No, I guess Manaphy can hit the 100 range. So you just go from 100 to 120, which is honestly fine. That's a nitpick. But not having anything between 100 and like 120 speed, but that's fine. I think this team's solid. I just think it could have benefited slightly more from picking in a direction. Maybe if it was sticking with the sand direction harder, going in the psychic terrain direction a little harder. But it's a good team, honestly. And you know what? There's different modes you can do with both. 5-turn sand extra in the end of the world. Unburden, Psychic Seed, Sneasler is certainly a nice bit of synergy. I love fucking Tangrowth. I love fucking Skeledirge. I think this is a good team. Next up, we have Grant in 4th. Grant has just hyper offensive setup nonsense that I also think is supported somewhat decently with Pokemon like Landorus, Clefable, and Aegislash, who can take hits and lay down some status moves maybe if needed. There's obviously a lot of pressure to just stay on the offense, and that could be hard to do with frailer, fast Pokemon. But not that it's hard to stay on the offense of this Pokemon, but it's high risk, right? Because you don't have switch-ins generally. But with that backbone, I think of some defensive Pokemon that Grant got out of the way picking early. He might be good. They can set up his hazard and screen game pretty well. Obviously, Grip Snarl really phenomenal at second foot screens. A lot of those high risk, high reward setup sweepers here too, like Zerkatry and Kartana, certainly another one. Samurott Hisuian is really good with laying down the free spikes. It's fantastic with that Ceasel's Edge move that is just really fucking annoying. No rapid spin seems like a bit of a waste here when you've got that kind of hazard setup. But I don't think Grant really pigeonholed himself too much in any direction aside from laying down pain constantly and massively. And I think that's really the kind of build you want to see in free draft because I don't think there's any guarantee you'll ever be able to wall 11 of the Pokemon on anybody's team here because there's too much crazy shit going on. Which takes us back to what I think some of the pitfalls of Stall were. But I think Grant goes in the opposite direction, and that will be to his benefit. At the same time, there are times when you want to take hits, and being limited to just basically 3 Pokemon that are actually good at that here could be rough for Grant. But we will see. Up next, we have Ross, who earned himself third for a very traditionally styled team that actually almost doesn't look out of place for a regular draft if you squint, because things like Zarina are basically always drafted in every normal draft because the tuning makes it very desirable. And that is certainly the case here. I think Chansey's always a solid pick to throw in a draft. Because I mean, well, I thought you said Stall was bad. I did, but throwing Chansey on a team doesn't make it Stall. It's just a good special, wall pivot that you can really abuse. And with things like Gliscor and Rotom Wash here that are great physical defense guys, Chansey is well suited. You've got Mega Lopunny, I think one of the best megas, maybe the best mega. The only things I'd really put above it maybe are Mega Scissor or I honestly like it better than Gallade, but you could maybe say Gallade. And I like Gallade a lot. Goldango's really good. I haven't seen as much Goldango in draft as I'd like, but like I've seen it doesn't always perform super well, but it's good, and I know the potential's there, and I have no doubt it can do pretty good here, especially with Alolan Ninetales is setting up Aurora Veil right and being able to block the defog enough Goldango. It's a fun little niche use of good as gold. Same for maybe laying enough Toxic Spikes with the Lego, though I'm certain most people have poisons to get rid of that. Yeah, just really solid pivoting game between Gliscor, Rotom Wash, and then Victini even could bring in U-turns and those hard-hitting V-creates. I just see a lot of good options for every kind of play style here. Yeah, I suppose the speed tiers are a little limited. I know it could be worse because you go from 103 in Lego to 135, whatever, with Lopunny. That's not. I know you got Ninetales at 9 and 109, so really, I've got not much to complain about. Yeah, that's honestly fine because the 120 speed tiers are pretty sparsely populated. Yeah, no, it's a good team. Yeah, another criticism, I guess, would be Lokix, Nihilego, and Didi. I'd say the team takes kind of a fall off in quality there. And I hate to say it, too. It sounds like one of those guys who's like, oh, every Pokemon on fucking OU is bad. But, like, in a free draft, I mean, yeah, kind of. Like, it's good. Look at some of the other 3 picks you see here, where it's like, let's look at our last few, where it's like Keldeo, Ursaluna, Tangrowth, Manaphy, fucking Mamoswine. Like, Lokix, Nihilego, and Didi, all good Pokemon. They just look a lot more tame compared to those. But they contribute things to the team here. I think maybe I would have gone a little more in the bulk direction because I think you're hitting hard enough with things like Goldango, Lopunny, Victini, certainly. But maybe I'm being too harsh on it there. That's just a personal preference. Good team overall. Can really do what it needs to. Hazard game is above reproach too, which I didn't mention. Yeah, fantastic stuff. Next up, we have Ken. Ken is in second for I think consistently pretty much picking one of the top. I mean, maybe not the most broken thing on the board every time, but Ken, you can tell, is picking basically one of the best. The only turn where I'd say Ken like puts on the brakes a little bit and doesn't pick one of the best things left is probably Mega Aggron, because Mega Aggron is more of a niche Mega. Like, it's not always the best one. But that's fine. It's a very good Mega, and it's certainly well supported here with all the flyers and water resistance flyers. And what am I talking about? Fire resistance. Wait. Ugh. With all of the ground resistances, that's what I meant to say. Yeah, because it's weak to ground. With all the flying types here to resist ground and fighting, and then there's plenty of fire resist too. I think it's well at home, and it can make up for its lack of. Well, not that it's lack of anything. It's just being a defensive bag is a little harder, right? Because you can't run a defensive item like boosters or leftovers. I suppose Togekiss can wish onto it, I think, so that's the one option. I guess maybe I would have provided a slightly more ideal cleric. Not that Togekiss is bad as a cleric, but it's not usually its best role. So maybe that's a minor criticism. But yeah, this team's fantastic. It feels like Ken just kind of took Ting Lu lasting to round 6 was kind of insane. I didn't want it because I don't think it really fit my team, but I think Ken was in a very good position to really pick it up and make use of the fact that he didn't have a ground or a dark type, and even if it's some of those types, Ting Lu can be very useful because with that it's basically like the specially defensive equivalent of Landorus Therian. I mean, they can't pivot. It's a bad comparison, but that's the generalized statement I'm making right now. Slowking Galar is very good, also kind of insane that it made to round 7. To be fair, I don't think it was really supposed to. I think Rash wanted it, but he took Slowbro or something. And yeah, so unfortunately, Ken was able to scoop that up for Rash. And it's really good. Yeah, Darm is there despite much controversy. That's a really good offensive Pokemon. Can run into troubles with draft for things like Rock'em and U-Turn. I don't think that's actually going to come most games. But yeah, Ken probably is the most viable overall full set of Pokemon. Now, I guess if I had to get into another nitpick, I guess I could see maybe what could do well here. I don't know, maybe like an offensive ice type, right? Because Mega Aggron is special defense. It's nothing to write home about. It doesn't have an item either. Volcarona is good, but not really a defensive Pokemon, and same goes for Galarian. I guess Milotic could handle it though if it doesn't have Freeze Dry. I mean, yeah, there's not really a lot of weaknesses with this team to be named. Speed tiers are covered pretty decently with Superior and Dragapult. I guess you could be better there, but that's just me trying to find something to complain about. Yeah, good team, solid team. The only one who I thought was above Ken here was drumroll, Jonathan. I think Jonathan did a really good job drafting. Right off the bat, I see Great Tusk, Tapu Koko, Tornadus Therian. What a nightmare treat. Not to say, I mean, that's just looking at the first three. If you're ranking drafts at the first three, that runs away home with this because those three together are just my goodness. You've got all the hazard removal you could ever want. Great Tusk can set them as well. You've got a longevity with Tapu Koko's Roost and Tornadus' Regenerator. It's really good. Mega Venusaur is a solid defensive Mega. I really like it because it can do all kinds of different sets. Sleep Powder, Leech Seed, coverage for most things you'd want to deal with. Great round 9, round 10 pickup with Latias, and round 11 pickup with Swampert is a great defensive water that can pivot and set hazards. Scissor's fantastic. I suppose in terms of weaknesses, it's just some, I don't know, Tyranitar in round 4. And not that, and this is why it's a nitpick. Tyranitar is not bad. I don't know if it would have been the thing that was appealing to me in round 4. I don't know what it's energized as well here. I shouldn't say that. Again, this is when I bring back to the free draft standards of things being a little more you got to be a little more scrutinizing. It's fantastic on this team, but I also just am like, I don't know if it would have been the top priority. But every Pokemon here I really love. It's like I feel like this team is full of draft all-stars, where it's like I've seen all these Pokemon do incredible work. Even Satitan, who I'd probably be the most skeptical team member of overall, I've seen that do great things with Bellytrim and Ice Shard because it can be a really hard Pokemon to deal with, even just to take out one key threat. Um, so I think that works. It's also faster than you'd think. It's got like 74 speed. So honestly, like it can do things Azumarill wouldn't dream of. Configure is solid defensive ghost. Like I think the team is kind of like Ron's, where like, I mean, actually no, I shouldn't say that because this team has a lot of top threats that make you groan, like Tapu Koko and Tornadus Therian. But it's got a lot of Pokemon that aren't necessarily outright broken, like Arcanine, Scizor, like Cofagrigus, Venusaur Mega, but Swampert, but are like they're draft all stars for a reason. There's a reason almost every draft picks these when they're mid tiers, and even though this is free draft, I think Jonathan was very smart to pick them up because they may not be the most broken thing that's left on the board in the time, but they fit into the team extremely well and can help their partners out quite good. I see a lot of good defensive options. I see a lot of good offensive options. I feel like I'm kind of rambling here and I've run out of steam. But yeah, that's my review. I don't know. Remember, these rankings aren't really predictions. They're more just like if I was picking a team purely based off quality and honestly my own subjective opinions of what I think is good, I'm probably gonna take what I have at number 1 over what I have at number 8. But I could anybody at number 8 could sweep the whole damn thing. It all comes down to how well you prep, really, not even so much the perceived quality of your team. So yeah, well, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this. I know it's really hard to parcel listening to the whole thing at once, but some people seem to enjoy it. So yeah, all right, enjoy your battles.